Greetings, I am that Rob Human, and I'm going to be walking you through how to set up a new project for Tabletop Playground using Create-TTPG-Package. It is a Node script that builds a workspace for you somewhere on your file system, decoupled from where Tabletop Playground exists on the file system. So you can have your development environment somewhere else, and it'll hook right into Tabletop Playground. Additionally, I'm going to be walking you through some of the scripting functions that exist in it, as well as get into the JSX transformer that I wrote, and you can make use of to maybe have a better experience with writing UI elements. For part one of this, I'm going to assume that you're just a game developer who wants to stand up a boilerplate project. Part two, we'll get into some of the more scripting stuff with TypeScript or whatnot, and then part 2.5, we'll get into the JSX stuff. So to begin with, this does require Node.js, and a package manager called Yarn. I'm not going to walk you through on how to install that. It's fairly straightforward. There are plenty of tutorials out there. I'm not going to waste your time. So from here on out, I'm going to assume that you have Node, which is Node.js, installed, as well as Yarn Package Manager. This one. I mean, it's fairly straightforward. You just go download those, install them, and you'll be able to do this from here. So I've got my TTPG persistent download directory, which is where your mods hang out when they're on your computer. Open over here, and I've got my empty packages folder. This is kind of where my in-development projects will end up actually existing, and that's straight on my hard drive, completely outside of TTPG. So I'm just going to open up PowerShell here. We're just going to do this. Yarn create TTPG package, my package, and I'm going to use a certain template for TSX. You can use TS or TypeScript, or JS or JavaScript. It takes all 5 versions of that. So TypeScript, TS, JavaScript, JS, or TSX, which is the JSX parser already integrated. So I'm going to go with this because this is what I recommend, and it's just easier for me, so I'm just going to do that. Run that. It's going to do its thing. It might ask you to confirm, yes, I want to download this, and there we go. Enter a name for your package. My package. You can take the recommended GUIDs for these. It generates them randomly, but if you for some reason need to enter a custom one, this is how you do it. I'm just going to hit enter to go through the defaults, and it's going to ask where is your TTPG persistent download directory. It takes its best guess. You might want to have a look and make sure. This is correct for me though, so I'm just going to go there. That's fine for project version number, and there we go. So in my packages, I've got my package. So I'm going to go into that, and I'm going to run VS Code. VS Code is the recommended development, the IDE that most people use for this. I strongly recommend it as well. Do your thing. Also, this could have been instantiated inside of a Git repo if you want to have, your project up on GitHub. Totally an option. You can also initialize one through VS Code. There are ways to do it. I'm not going to get too much into the weeds about that for now. But moving on, we got a couple config files that I'll get into later when necessary. We have our source, which is where all the scripting hangs out while you're working on it. And there are a couple other folders here that we'll get into. Because of the fact that this supports TypeScript, which if you don't know what TypeScript is a superset of JavaScript. I think it's a superset. I can't remember the direction that's technically right. It's JavaScript adjacent. It includes all, like, it's more strictly typed than JavaScript, which is not typed at all. But one of the things that you need to do if you're a TypeScript user is transpile stuff into JavaScript for Tabletop Playground to be able to use it. So the SRC, or source directory, is where all your TypeScript stuff hangs out. And when you run a certain script that I'll get into later, it actually transpiles all of that automatically and shoves it into your TTPG folder. So I'm going to actually go over to my TTPG folder here for a sec, and you'll see that's right, I haven't linked it yet. So I'm going to open up a terminal. My first command here, yarn dev. And that's actually going to build up all my TypeScript into JavaScript. See, there it is, hello world.js. And if I go into my TTPG folder, there it is, my package underscore dev. This represents the in development version of your package. So while you're working on it, it shows up in Tabletop Playground, and you can play with it roughly live. We'll get into a little bit of the nuance there. Other directories, so dev is actually what links into the TTPG directory. That's this. This is actually a soft link. So that hangs out there. That's fine. Assets is where you can actually put any kind of 3D files or textures, just like you would any other TTPG package, and you just put them in there and it'll show up in your project. Again, that is a symlink to here. This is actually, just make them. See, there it is. And that is in my TTPG folder. So any assets that you drop into here will show up in both locations, both in my packages assets as well as in TTPG itself. That's the power of this. It lets you just build seamlessly and develop seamlessly. So you have all the all this stuff, and you've got your development. Suppose you're done. Like, you're ready to build. Yarn build. And there you go. Now you can actually go into mod.io, and you'll see that there is my package without the underscore dev, and it's ready to ship. You can actually upload it right onto mod.io from within TTPG. So this is a good way to, like I said, to kind of have a development version and a production version at the same time. They use different GUIDs, which means that they can both exist in your TTPG instance at the same time. That lets you develop and iterate on it while also having the production version in your directory. So there's no conflict. So that's a handy aspect of the workspace. As for scripting, actually, do I want to get into the scripting yet? Let's actually do a couple things here. If ever you need to kind of eliminate the dev version from your TTPG folder, like if you need to do a reset here, you can do yarn clean. And like I said, that removes your dev version. It's no longer there. That removes your dev version from TTPG, and you can just do yarn dev again to relink it. That's a good way to just kind of do a soft reset. There's also purge. That will actually delete the production build from your TTPG folder if it exists. That's handy if you're like, I need a complete reset to rebuild. Or if you want to build a new version to launch to production, do a purge and then do a build. Oh, this is terrible. I actually can't remember what what reset does. I think reset just clears out your local config. Let's find out. Yeah, okay, so what it does is it destroys your local config and lets you make and reconfirm your TTPG directory. The two config files that we have here are a local and a project. If you are a user of a Git repo, you want to add the local JSON file to your git ignore. In fact, I think I already have. Yeah, the default git ignore already has it included. This could potentially be different from user to user. So if you're collaborating with people on this project using a Git repo, this should not be added to your repo. You should not commit this. And that's because it's going to vary from person to person. The project config, however, is your source of truth on the project itself. It contains your GUIDs, whether or not there's a transpilation step or your version number or whatnot. This should be in your repo. If you're a single user, then that doesn't really matter, but if you're collaborating with other people, those are important to know. Most of the other stuff you shouldn't really need to play with too much. I mean, if you're an experienced scripter, you probably already know your way around the package JSON that you probably shouldn't really be messing with anyways. And if you're an experienced coder, you probably might be wondering why yarn and not npm directly. And that's because the TTPG scripts, which is actually what runs all the steps that I've been referring to, uses yarn internally to build a node modules folder. So you have to use yarn, unfortunately. Sip of coffee. So yeah, those are kind of the scripting shortcuts that you can do to just move your project around as needed. For any of your projects, basically scripting rules applies. Check out the API stuff, and it's just like scripting here. You would build a script, it would transpile into your TTPG directory, and you can pick it up within the editor within the game. I don't know why I felt like I needed to get complicated with the scripting itself. I'm not sure. I'm not going to prattle on and waste your time. But hit up the Discord if you need scripting help, by the way. Really good resources there. I hang out there. A lot of the people there do scripting. So if you're new to the scripting world, hit them up. Hit us up. The other thing I want to showcase here is actually a new thing that I've written, and it's part of this template. And I alluded to it earlier, is the JSX. If you're not familiar with JSX, it is basically another syntax for scripting. It's used primarily in modern front-end development, so like React or Vue or some other frameworks. It reads a lot like HTML. So if you have any experience with HTML, you might, it might be familiar for you. Let me do a little bit of a before, and I'm going to assume that this hello world script is actually going to get added to an object. So let's do const ref object. Now let's just, I don't need to ref that. I can do ref objects dot add UI element. Right? Const element equals new UI element, and we all know how this works, right? Element dot position equals new vector. Load that. Thank you. So, yeah, this would put a UI that currently doesn't have any contents on it onto your object. So, for example, I could do const layout equals new layout box layout dot add child. Set child, new text, set text, Really? You're gonna complain at me? Okay. Text widget. Is it not a text widget? Oh, because I haven't imported the right one. Set text hello world. There we go. Wow, that was dodgy. It's been a while, can you tell? So, this will add a text to your object, and I'll load up TTPG in a minute here to kind of show you what this is doing. In fact, let me do that now. You know, it would help if I actually ran the dev script. There we go. So as you can see, here's my package dev. There it is. Now there's no objects, so I'm just gonna copy from another one. Let's do White Bishop. Sure. Script. Hello world. Fancy that. We're just gonna save that. Let's preview a new thing. Now obviously there is no thing here, and that's because I haven't actually element.widget equals layout. Run dev that. That's done. We come over here, reload scripting. That's really high up. Let's actually lower that down to something a little more manageable. There we go. So yeah, we got our text UI on our object, and very, very fancy. So as things get more complicated, your syntax here might get a little bit more obtuse, is how I'll describe it. So one of the things that I've been working on is this. We still need our position here, our element and all that, but we can do this now. And I need to import our render function from here. Text world. And it's going to be exactly the same, but it still shows up. So essentially what this is it lets you do an HTML-like, HTML-esque syntax for your widgets. There is not a one-to-one correlation on what they're called in TTPG versus what they're called in this JSX syntax, but they're fairly close, and I feel like they're a little intuitive. Particularly if you are familiar with HTML, you might recognize things. So like, for example, a text box in TTPG is actually an input here. So I can do input value equals some value, and that's a self-closing tag, and I can do onChange equals handle change. I can define handle change equals, and if I remember the syntax of this right, this is widget text box, and this is the onChange handler. I think this can actually be undefined. I'm not sure. I think that can actually be undefined. I can't remember. And value is the string. There we go. So whenever the input of this gets called, I can do console.log. Oh. And I'm actually going to change that to handle commit, because I don't need to spam my console log. So I'm going to do on commit instead of on change. Recompile this. Come over here, reload scripting. Don't worry about that. And it's a text box. And I totally misspelled hello. That's awesome. Okay, so I can also just import the value, right? There we go. And it actually prints some value. There you go. So, like I said, it's lets you do some fancy layout stuff. Let's make a little pop-up. Why not? We need a vertical box. I know it's gonna complain. There we go. Vertical box, and we want a horizontal box inside of that. And inside of that, I want a text with a justify equals text justification. That is the enum. Title bar. And we're gonna do close. That'll simulate a close button. Sure. Be align center. I hate enums so much. Yeah, that'll do fine. And then we'll do a... Okay, so what this will... You know what? I'm actually going to pull something from a Git repo of mine real quick. I'm just going to pull a URL of a image that I have handy somewhere. I'm off screen on another thing, typing away furiously because we'll do it live, right? Haha. Oh, that's perfect. Okay. Copy image address. Let's throw an image in here. And we're going to use the URL instead of the actual syntax for that. Ta-da! So we've got our title bar close, and that's interesting. That's not... go away. Go away. There we go. And it's got my image. So that title bar, let's see if we can fancy that up a little bit. So we're actually going to do a border. Color equals 0.125, 0.125, 0.125, 1. And we're going to shove that horizontal box in there. But I'll tab back over here. I want this title bar to take up more room than the close. I want it to actually stretch and then have close at the very end. And if you use horizontal boxes, you probably already know where this is going, but because of the way that JSX works, you have to kind of do a little bit of a finicky thing, but there are helper functions for it. So to give an element a weight in this context, I'm actually going to do a box child call, the weight, and then I can just give it that element as the second argument. Oh, I just realized something. Hang on. Oh, worry about it later. So we've got our box child, which is a special function, and gives it the weight, and then you give it the element that you want to be the next child, and it should just, there you go. There's the title bar, and it's got the right weight, and then there's the close. So yeah, that's basically how the JSX syntax works. It's very HTML-like. For those of you who are familiar with React or other modern frameworks, this will probably be really familiar. I'm actually going to do another thing here. Bear with me just a minute. We're actually going to do button. Do the thing. Right, so we're just adding another child here in this vertical box. And there is an event handler for onClick. We'll do handle click. So what I plan on doing here, and I don't actually need any arguments to do this, is when I click this button, I want to actually change the border color. So to do that, I can't actually access this border directly. Now I could yoink this out of here and actually do like, this, assign it to a variable and pull it out of here. So I could do, too far. I could do something like this. Const the border equals that, and I can just the border. That's fine. I could do that, and then I could, in the click handler, I could then do the border. Well, that's a weird thing with the JSX, is that actually it's not the widget itself, it's a JSX element. That's a little inconvenient. Now, there is a workaround thing for this, which is that same render function that I have floating around here, which forces it to be a widget. So I can do like border, except it's a generic widget, not necessarily the border widget, so my IntelliSense doesn't like it. So here's the workaround for this, and this is actually the pattern that I prefer. We're just going to shove that back into here, and I wish I had my prettier online, but I don't. There we go. What are you complaining about? Yes, okay. Const handle click equals, and I don't need any arguments for this for now. So I need to be able to pull a reference to this border. Const border ref equals use ref, and I'm going to give it a border widget. And I've imported use ref from the JSX-in-TTPG library. And what this does is it lets you actually pass the reference as an attribute, just like that. So now, anywhere in your code, once it has actually rendered, what ends up happening is you get a reference to it. So border ref dot, you got two things going on here. You've got current and clear. We actually want current, and this is the current reference to the thing that it's referencing. So in theory, it will be a border widget or a null value. So we want to check to make sure it's not null. So if it is not equal to null, that's always a good safety check to do. I can do border ref dot current dot set color, and I can give it 5, 0.25, 0.25, 1. So there we go. This handle click callback will actually check to see if the border is a valid reference, and if it is, it will set the color of the border. Let me run this. I'll refresh it, and there it is. It's now turned red, and that's how you actually pull a reference in JSX deeply nested. Again, you could do all that the render wrapper and make sure that your widget is an instance of a specific widget, but this is kind of, I think, a little bit more convenient. I need this handle commit. Now, there is a thing about this. If at some point you actually clear out a widget from your library, so like if you want to do, if throughout the process of the life cycle of your UI here, you delete this border element, well, JavaScript still has a reference to it in this object. So whenever you delete an element from the UI, you might want to call the border ref.clear. So like, let's do, I'm going to make another ref here. Box ref. And this will be vertical box, right? So now I've got box ref, and yes, it's complaining because there is no method for that. Dot remove child, and actually do this. I need to make sure this is not null as well. I can actually delete the border right during the click. Right? So I'm going to reload the script here, and it's gone. But this reference is still holding on to a reference to it, and that hasn't, theoretically, been garbage collected. So there, if you do this wrong, and I mean really wrong, you might have some memory leaks here and there. So the way to do this is actually to, once it's been removed, you could actually do border ref.clear, and that will actually drop the reference. So border ref.current is now null again. So that's just a garbage collection thing. Something to be aware of. You probably won't need to worry about it too much, but if you get a lot of widgets that change a lot, you might need to clear out your references if you use that. Just an FYI. So yeah, that's pretty much it. You can check out the documentation on the GitHub for TTPG, or JSX-in-TTPG, and I kind of enumerated all the syntax that you have available and what their equivalences are. So like if you have an image widget, here are the equivalent properties that go on to the JSX element that correspond to a given thing in the TTPG scripting API. And if you get confused or have questions, I'm on the TTPG Discord. Just hit me up and I'm happy to answer questions. Hopefully this wasn't too painful to listen to, vis-a-vis my tendency to ramble and prattle on. Can you tell I don't do these very often? Super obvious, I know. But yeah, hit me up if you have any questions or recommendations or praise, or if you make something cool with this stuff, let me know. It's really rewarding for me, and I like endorphins, so go for it. Terrible at outros, so I'm just going to say here we go. Good luck.